Yeah, welcome back to this series on how to use Mixamo and Blender together with Clo3D. This is the garments that I'm going to animate today, and we now want to import everything that we set up from the last video. So if you've not seen the first one, go check that out. If you've got everything set up, the first thing we want to import is our T-posed avatar. So I'm just going to take my T-pose avatar and drag this into the workspace. I'm going to set this to add avatar. The scaling is meters because it came from Blender, and the rest I can leave as it is. The one thing to be sure of is turn off align bottom to ground. When you're working with between Blender and Clo and anything else, turn off align bottom to ground. This is going to affect the location of things, so make sure this is off. Our avatar is now added to the scene, and I just need to quickly move some of these sleeve pieces. So if I grab this sleeve, move this like this, we can start to simulate this around our avatar and set up the animation. I'm just going to check that I don't have any pins attached to my avatar. No. Just to my... Okay. So what we want to do to simulate this in the best way possible, we want to set the hat to layer 2. So I'm going to select the hat. I'm going to go to simulation properties and set this to layer 2 so it sits on top. The next thing would be the shirt. I'm going to set this to layer 1. The t-shirt would be layer 0. And then underneath this t-shirt, we have the pants. So I'm going to select these pants and set these to layer -1. I can set the particle distance of all of this to about, let's see what we've got here. This can be 8, 9. The hat can for sure be about 10. T-shirt as well. Set this to 8. We don't want the particle distance too small for this because it's going to take a long time to simulate the garments, especially in the animation. So now I've set the layering, I'm just going to quickly simulate this and see what we get. So the layering's worked, everything's fine. The one thing I'm just going to do though is I completely lost the shape of my hat. So I'm going to select these top pieces of the hat and this one too, and right click and choose solidify. And the solidify strength to this I'm going to set to about 80, and then just resimulate this again. My shirt's sitting on top of my t-shirt, the layering's working fine, the hat shape has kind of stayed, and the sleeves are just hanging down a bit. So yeah, this is all good now. I might want to just lift up these jeans a little bit. So I'm just going to turn off the visibility of everything except the pants. Choose the pants and just lift them up on his waist a bit. And then just turn all the visibility back on. So press Ctrl and A to select everything, and then Shift and Q turns on and off the visibility. So let's just run this one last time. So exciting. So now we have everything layered and simulating and not kind of colliding in any way. We can transfer the frame to frame 1. So we want this garment to transfer the pose to the first frame. Well, the 0 frame, not the first frame. So I'm going to bring in the export that we made before. So I've got frame 0, T-pose, and then my animation here. So I'm just going to drag over frame 0. So after, add, and choose, this time choose morph target when you add. Choose morph target, add scaling to meters, and my frame count is going to be set to 25, so I have 25 frames of transition for the pose, and just click OK. And if you set everything up correctly, your avatar is going to shift to that pose, and then we can start the animation walk cycle. So let's just let him settle down. And now everything is set up. The hat, I think, let's strengthen these pieces and turn the solidify down to about 15. And then let's just run the simulation to get these garments to hang a bit better. So this is looking fine for now. The one thing that we want to kind of check actually, strengthen this, just see what it looks like. Choose those hat pieces, and I'm just going to turn the solidify back up. So what this is doing is going to hold the drape of the hat a lot better. We could do something like this for the collar as well if we turn the visibility of the hat off. The collar I could also choose to strengthen, not strengthen, solidify, and add maybe 20% solidify in this value here. What we do want to just check is that we kind of keep the garment connected to the body in some way, and I'm just going to put a pin, so tack on avatar, and tack the back neck of this shirt, so right in the bottom here, just to the back neck of my avatar. So when he walks, it kind of, I'm not going to lose my collar. So just simulate this quickly again, and then we can start simulating the walk cycle. So at this point, the garment should be quite stable when it's simulating. You don't want any wobbling or intersections or anything like that. And the reason this is running okay is because I don't have any overlap between my avatar's underarm and the body. There's nothing colliding here, and this looks kind of good for now. The one thing we can do is select the avatar and change the skin offset, maybe down 1, so that the clothing sits closer to the body and isn't hovering above it. So just simulate that again, and this should sync closer to the avatar's body. And now we can go into animation mode to bring the to start with the animation. So first thing I would do is just choose your avatar and delete this, and then import our Alembic file. So I'm just going to drag the Alembic file we exported before. So we called this animation walk frame 0 to 60. This is what we exported in the previous video, and this is going to be added. FPS is 30 like we had in Blender, scaling to meters like we had in Blender. Choose OK. Just check that your pin didn't get deleted from the back of your collar. So now we've added a new avatar. We might have lost our neck pin. It looks like we did. So I'll just tack this onto the avatar again. Choose tack on avatar. Just choose the back of the neck here and just tack it to the avatar. And then let's turn all the visibility back on and see what we can do now for the animation. So if we go now into the animation workspace, press OK. If you run through this timeline, our avatar is moving, but our clothing is not. So we need to simulate all these frames for the garments. First thing I would say is just run the simulation in this mode now. This is set to complete. So just see how this responds. This will be a bit heavier on your system and might take a bit longer to calculate. But this is what we want for animation. So give this a second to simulate. So this looks quite like it's relaxed a bit now. So we're just going to turn the simulation off. And we can start to run the first simulation cycle. So at this point, we want to make sure that our fabric presets all have a setting. So make sure that it's not just set to preset custom. Give everything a good setting that is kind of accurate to how your fabric should respond. So the hat is leather, it has a leather setting. The shirt is jersey, so and so on. Set the animation, set the simulation running, and then give it a second and just hit record. So that's the record button right here. And now our animation is going to run through one time and the simulation is going to happen. This is it's going to take about 3 minutes to run these 60 frames at this particle distance. and then we can see if there's any errors on the other side of the simulation. So now the simulation has finished running, and we can play this back and see how it looks. So this is looking kind of fine, but you see, if you choose this repeat option here, we can see how this is repeating. Now we get this glitch from the start to the finish again. And we can fix all that in Blender. The thing to notice is our first frame and our last frame are quite different. Here the garments are sitting down and back, and in the end they're sitting forward because of the movement of the character. We're going to blend at this point in the middle, so this 30 frame, but we still don't want to have this much kind of difference between the start and the finish. So to fix this, just jump to the end, delete the track that we just created, and then go back to the beginning, to the first frame, and then we can rerun the simulation. But I think if I look at the particle distance of everything, we can make some changes here in order to speed this up a little bit. So the t-shirt, I'm going to set to 12 particle distance. Pants are set to 11 currently, so we can leave them at 11. All those pieces are at 11 now. The shirt is set to 9. Can probably leave that at 9. And what's the hat set to? 10. Let's choose everything and set this to 12. This might speed up our simulation a little bit. And now our garment is kind of starting from a moving pose rather than a hanging pose. So I'm just going to set the simulation running and then hit record. So this is now running with our new particle distance. So this is running again, and now this is down to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So those changes in particle distance have just kind of improved our simulation time. The one thing I could do actually is set all this to quads so that we can smooth this mesh in the end. So I'm just going to delete this track quickly. I'm going to go back to simulation. And by default, this mesh is set to triangles. So if you zoom in and look, this is all triangles. But it would be nice to have some quads to work with if I want to add mesh smoothing in Blender in the end. So choose all your pattern pieces, scroll all the way to the bottom, and under miscellaneous, you have mesh type, currently set to triangle. Switch this out to quads. It might take a second to like remesh everything, but this will give us a bit more control over smoothing the mesh with subdivision in Blender. So this is now all set to quads. I've got quad in my mesh type here, and if I look at my mesh view here, this is now made up of squares and 4-sided shapes rather than 3-sided shapes. So this is a bit better for us to work with inside Blender. So come back to the animation workspace, just start off the simulation. This might take a second because we've just remeshed this all to quad, so give it a second to load the simulation. Now this is simulating fine. I'm just going to hit the record button and run through this animation one more time. So this is about 2 minutes simulation time. So let's see what this looks like in the end. The simulation has run, and what I'm noticing is the shirt is actually falling away from the avatar as he's walking. So in the beginning, we've got it set here, in the middle it's falling, and in the end it's almost fallen off. We can fix that by adjusting the color, but this speed looks nice. So if I put this on repeat, this looks like a nice little walk. We can set this to loop up in Blender. But the nice thing now is if we go to this frame and this frame, they're not too far off. This is going to be a bit easier for us to blend. But still, I want to fix this color issue. So let's just delete this track, go to simulation. I'm going to turn off the hat visibility, and I'm just going to drag this a bit better around the front. so that this whole shirt is just sitting a little bit nicer around the neck. The collar I'm going to unsolidify, and I'm actually going to set it to strengthen so it sits nice and sharp. And this should kind of stabilize the garment in the front a bit better. Now that the collar is hanging in a good position, I can really solidify this to make it not unbend. So if I unstrengthen and set the solidify, actually let's leave it strengthened, turn on solidify, and then look at the strength and set this to 85, right? This should give us a lot better stability around the collar, and everything else looks kind of okay. If the garment is moving around too much, you could select these body panels and just solidify these as well, but give them a really low solidify strength, so maybe like 10%, so that they hold a bit of their shape and don't go too far away, but they still have freedom to kind of move dynamically. One other thing we can do is look in the animation space, right click and go to simulation properties, and we can set the self collision iteration count to 2. The reason we would do this is if we've got wobbling or shaking or intersecting between parts of our garment, this can calm that down. It will be a longer simulation, but it will look a lot more refined. And if the garment is moving a lot in the simulation, if it's a dress or something that moves around a lot in the space, you can set this time step down. So now it's set to 0.03 recurring. If you set this to 0.02 recurring, the animation is going to run the same speed, but it will change the stepping of the time so that the garment moves in a slightly more controlled way. I think this is how the results that I've got, so this is what I want to share with you guys. For now, we could also add a wind control, but this is not necessary for this type of garment. I don't want this to all blow behind him. So let's just run this simulation again, now that we've kind of changed these simulation settings here. And then we're going to record the animation one last time. So let's hit record now that it's animating. And now that we've changed these settings, our simulation time's kind of jumped up to 3 minutes because we've got more collision and more time stepping. So I'm going to run this one last time like this, and then let's take a look and see how this is ready to get into Blender. This has finished simulating, and I think we've got the same issue with this guy still falling. We can pin the color in a bit better and figure this out to get a nice loop. But for now, I think this is a good movement of all the fabric. This looks nice. So let's just go back to this point. I'm going to delete this track. I'm going to go to simulation and just hide the hat again. And what we could do first off is pin the collar in a bit more. So I'm just going to choose the back of the collar here and the front of the side of the avatar's neck. So it's got less space to move away from the body. And then let's just add another pin on this side. Just connect it over here. Around a little. We could even set this solidify up to, say, 95. Let's add solidify the back yoke, set this to 60. And then let's just quickly simulate this. So let's turn the hat back on so we can see everything. And the point here is just to try and get some consistency between the start of the animation cycle and the end, so that we're not clipping from the garment hanging off the body to the garment hanging onto the body. So this is all attached now. Start with it a little more closed, even like this. And then let's start the simulation from this point. Just strengthen this hat because this brim doesn't look great. Strengthen. Just pull the hat a little bit down. Strengthen this. Solidify this a little bit, maybe 45, and then jump back into the animation workspace. And then let's run this one more time. So I'm going to run the simulation, and then I'm going to hit record. So again, this is going to take about 3 minutes, and then let's see what it looks like at the end. So this looks way better now. The garment's finished across the shoulder. The midpoint looks very similar to this one, and the start the same. We don't have too much difference. I mean, there's a bit, but it's not dramatic. What I could do again is just run this one more time from this frame back to the beginning. But I think it's not too much of an issue. For now, we can work with this. So this is now ready to export into back into Blender. So let's go back to the simulation space and select everything to work with. Actually, you know what? I'm going to run this one more time. I'm going to go back to my last frame. I'm going to turn off this track. Like, if you turn off this light, the track is deactivated. It's saved, but it's not gone, so I can save this track, go back to the beginning, and I'm just going to run this one more time to really get a consistent look from this frame to the last frame. So, see you guys in 3 minutes. Okay, so this has finished simulating again, and what I mean is just this frame and this frame aren't too far away from each other now. The same here, these three things are kind of not too different. If I look at the track underneath, this and this is quite different. This is not far off. But here, this top track is a lot better to work with. So now I've simulated this. It's working fine. We have a clip from start to finish, but we can fix that clip right there. So let's export all this to Blender. So back into this workspace, select everything. Actually, no. Go to File, Export, Alembic. Choose Ogawa, don't choose the other one, always choose Ogawa. And we're going to go to Clo, and I'll just export it into this Clo folder. So I'll call this Warp Cycle Frames 0 to 60. Right. And then click Save. I want unified UV coordinates. I want a thin welded export, and I want 30 FPS, and I want my scaling to be set to meters. So if I click OK now, this will just run through my 60 frames and export each frame. Then we can import all of this back into Blender. So this is nearly done. The one thing to be sure of is that you've got UV coordinates, unified UVs checked, because in my UV editor, I have all my garments and UVs laid out for the texturing. So now we're done with Clo. I can save this project. I'll save it as animation walk cycle, and we can go back to our Blender scene. So let's look at Blender. Right, this is where we were before, and we can now import this in. So go to File, Import, Alembic, go to our Clo folder, choose that file that we just exported, and click Import Alembic. Our garment's now in the scene, so if I press play, this should be fine. Yeah, this is going back around, but you see we have a clip. That clip right there, just at the end, when we get to frame 60, there's a clip. we can fix that and make this cycle background infinitely, and I'm going to do that in the next video. So if you've got to this point, I'll see you guys in the next video.